What's up, football world? I am Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show. And today we're doing a Jag-specific podcast because we're talking about my Jaguars and what is going on now that rookie minicamp has come and gone, and now that we are in OTA season. And before I really kind of expand upon what we're going to talk about, because I want to take three storylines that we need to discuss, I want to make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you check out all the cool things that we're doing on Believe. Make sure we do all of those things before we go forward. So click the like and make sure we get it. Today, I want to talk about three storylines that we need to pay close attention to over the course of the summer, now that we are in the organized team activity portion of the offseason program. And the first thing that we have to monitor is the Travis Hunter experiment over? And I know Travis Hunter is coming back from a knee injury, and he's in the midst of rehab and not really on the field participating like the rest of the squad. But there's a lot of conversation about Travis Hunter and the role that he's going to play this season. Last year, the number 2 overall pick spent 2/3 of his time on offense at wide receiver and played sparingly at defense. And some of that was to be expected based on the construction of the roster. At wide receiver, you had questions about, look, Brian Thomas last year was the number 1 receiver. Who was going to be the number 2? You didn't have an established one. Maybe Parker Washington could grow in that role, but no one in the building was necessarily confident that he would be able to handle those responsibilities right away. So Travis Hunter was slotted in as the 2. Parker Washington would be the 3. And then they were just going to kind of do it by committee. Well, what happened was Travis Hunter started kind of gaining his footing, was beginning to play really well at the same time that Brian Thomas was struggling. And so they were set to kind of flip the situation where Travis Hunter was going to be the number 1. We got glimpses of him playing really well in London. He had a 100-yard game against the Rams, had a touchdown in that game. At the same time, he flipped the defense, had a PBU against Devontae Adams. And so you begin to get a feel for, hey, this is who he is. This is what he's going to be. He's going to play a major role. Right when they were about to really give him the keys to the castle and let him cook on the perimeter as a wideout, he has an injury in practice, and the season is ended, and we don't get a chance to really see what he looked like as the lead horse on offense. Well, then what happens is Parker Washington emerges. Jacoby Myers is acquired. They find a way for Brian Thomas to thrive in an offense that was different from the one that he flourished in as a rookie, and the offense caught fire. Well, now when you have that kind of momentum and you see what it looks like, you're a little slow to kind of tweak things because you can mess with the chemistry and the balance of the offense, particularly when people have kind of settled into their roles. You look on the other side of the ball, you lose Greg Newsome. You have some room to put Travis Hunter in the starting lineup opposite Buster Brown, who just re-signed to a new deal. So now you have your starting corners, whoever's 1, whoever's 2, it doesn't matter, but you have 2 starting cornerbacks. You have Jarian Jones being able to play as a nickel player. You have Jordan Lewis, who also can play in the nickel. So you have a nice dime package, and that doesn't even include how the safeties will get in the mix. In a defense that is zone heavy, that plays to the strengths that I believe Travis Hunter brings to the cornerback position, his instincts, awareness, and ball skills, it makes a lot of sense to put him at corner and allow him to start at corner and be a full-time player on the defensive side of the ball, and then sprinkle him in and as a package player on offense. Full disclosure, that's how I felt like he was going to be utilized from the jump when I watched him at college at Colorado when he was winning the Heisman Trophy. Even though he won the Heisman Trophy, Biletnikoff winner, he was the best receiver in college football. I felt like his future was corner first, wide receiver second. And the reason I felt like that is because the easiest way to preserve him and to be able to kind of save him and not tax him is when you put him on defense, particularly in a zone scheme, he can pick and choose when to engage. Some of those zones, he's not going to be on the primary guy. He's not going to be playing man-to-man. He just has to keep the ball from going over the top of the defense, keeping it in front. So from an energy expenditure standpoint, it's a lot easier to manage those snaps on defense. And then on offense, when you put him in the game, it can be we're putting him in the game to get him the ball on screens and swings and option routes and those things. or we're putting him on for a handful of plays. He's going to run some dummy routes, then he's going to come off. But we don't need him on the field 75 snaps on offense. Well, it took us a while to get there, but that's where we're at. Now, James Gladstone, general manager for the Jaguars, is adamant that, look, the volume will change according to what the Jaguars need at a time. And that's the same thing that was said last year. And I believe them in that. This year, the way the team is constructed, he is a more valuable piece of the defensive puzzle initially and still a key part of the offensive system. Because remember, Trevor Lawrence has plenty of weapons. You think about what they've done at wideout. We talked about Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, Bretton Strange. They brought in some more tight ends. Offensively, they can get by without him playing a major role. And then when you put him into the offense, he just enhances what you already have on the field. You like that because, hey, it's something that the defense has to prepare for, but it's not an every down thing. So they got to be aware of when he's on the field, when he's off the field, when 12 is in the game, how are they utilizing 12 and those things. You like that. From a learning standpoint, it's a lot easier for a two-way player to learn a package on one side than to learn the entire playbook on both sides. And it's just the volume of information and things that you have to remember while playing. It can be overwhelming. And what we know about Travis Hunter, he is at his best when he's playing fast and free. We have seen the plays that he's been able to kind of make just in the small sample size that we've seen him on the field. We don't want to give him every opportunity to be able to make those plays. And this role should be able to give him plenty of chances to make plays on defense, interceptions, PBUs, making tackles in space. He can do all that stuff. Like, he'll be fine. And then on offense, he's a designated hitter. When he comes onto the field, it is a time to get him the ball and to help him out. And even if he plays as the number 4 receiver or the number 3-4 receiver in their spread sets, it's a limited amount of snaps. You're talking about 20 to 30 max to get him on the field. That is a way for him to be a two-way player. So in spite of all the consternation and everyone saying this was a blown pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'll say, hold on, not so fast. Number 2 overall pick is still going to make an impact on both sides of the ball. If he plays to his potential, the impact will make him well worth the investment as the number 2 overall pick in last year's draft. Second storyline that we want to keep an eye on, and it relates to Travis Hunter's role on offense, and that is, will Brian Thomas Jr. remain the number 1 receiver? Last year, there was a lot of excitement going into the year about Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, personally, we were talking about he's the best receiver that we've seen in Jacksonville since Jimmy Smith. And everyone knows, remember, the pride, what Jimmy Smith has been able to do is second to none for the guys that have worn the teal. But when we looked at Brian Thomas Jr., that rookie season, he had 1,200 yards. He had 10 touchdowns. He was a Pro Bowl player, averaged 14.7 yards per catch. It was easy to say, well, if he did that as a rookie, another offseason of seasoning, the natural development that takes place, he might be a 1,500-yard receiver last year. And I will say that maybe we put too many expectations on him and expected him to be a superhero on the perimeter. And maybe he even himself put those kinds of lofty expectations on himself and maybe didn't handle the pressure as well as we would have liked him to, particularly early. And I will say this, there's a big difference going from being the number 2 receiver, where they're not counting on you, they're not looking for you, they're not game planning against you, to being the number 1. And what Brian Thomas learned early in the season, when you're the number 1 receiver, man, the defenses really pay close attention to you. They're not going to give you free access on the perimeter. They're not going to allow you to get into your bag and run the routes that you're very comfortable with or the routes that have been your most productive. You have to have not only the physical toughness to deal with the things that you're facing, you got to have the mental toughness to go stretches in the game without touching the ball, or to always have to work through brackets and double teams to get open. Early, Brian Thomas struggled. He struggled with the drops. There's no way to excuse it. I'm a big fan of his game, but he struggled with the drops. And when he struggled with the drops, it made it harder for Liam and the team to call plays for him because they just didn't know if it was going to be a 50-50 situation where he caught it or dropped it. Now, and I think it's really important because the noise was so loud, particularly the first half of the year when he was having issues with the drops. don't underestimate what he did the last part of the year. And I know he missed 3 games with injuries, but when he came back down the stretch, he was a big time playmaker. And people are talking about him suffering through the sophomore slump. And he did, in terms of not putting up the numbers. We talk about 1,200 yards compared to 707. What's interesting about it all, he averaged the same number of yards per catch last season as he did his rookie season. And when you think about getting close to 15 yards per catch, that means that he had a significant number of big plays that were a part of that stat line. And we talk about possession receivers kind of being 10, 11, 12 big play receivers at the high end, or maybe 17, maybe 18, even though Alec Pierce put up ridiculous numbers, averaging like 20 yards per catch. Normally, that's where you are. When I look at Brian Thomas Jr.'s not only film, but when I look at his numbers, 14.7 says he's a tweener. He's a mix. He's a mix of that big play specialist that you want. And we've seen that vertical shots, catch and run, deep overs, those things that really force defenses and defensive coordinators to say, hey, let's make sure we keep the ball in front. He's done that, but he's also made plays on underneath routes where he's able to catch the ball, make a guy miss, and run. The thing that we saw last year from the Jaguars that really unlocked him, particularly the last 6 games of the season when he played at his best for Liam Cohen, they started putting him on the outside. And they not only put him on the outside, they made it very easy for him when it came to getting the ball. Brian Thomas Jr. is going to get the ball in a couple of ways. He's going to get it on vertical routes straight down the field where he can take advantage of his speed and quickness. He also is going to get it on out-breaking routes where he can use his quickness and comfortability catching the ball outside, toe tapping to the sideline to make plays outside the numbers. The stats back that up. According to ESPN, when you look at the targets over the last 6 games, 21 of his 31 targets were on out-breaking routes that were targeted between the numbers and the sideline. That tells you, hey man, he is running a lot of out-breaking routes, a lot of sails, a lot of quick outs, a lot of speed outs, those things. Some would say, hey, maybe it's the hands and he is not at his best catching the ball across the middle. And maybe that's true. But what great coaches do is they find a way to play the game where the best players are always playing to their strengths. And so as we saw the uptick in production down the stretch with a lot of those balls coming on out-breaking the vertical routes, I would expect the Jaguars to pick up where they left off last season by doing similar things with Brian Thomas Jr. as he kind of carves his lane out as the number 1, number 2 receiver on this team. Here's the other thing that I think you have to remember, because some people better been calling for the Jaguars to trade him because, look, it was such a drastic drop-off. You got to trade him, got to get him out of here. He has to go by the trade deadline. We got to get the picks back. I will caution everyone who is clamoring for that or calling for that trade. If you go back and look at the playoffs, you look at the Buffalo Bills and how the Buffalo Bills played the Jaguars offense and how they went more man-to-man. They went real sticky coverage, and they challenged Jacoby Myers at the line of scrimmage, that he challenged Parker Washington at the line of scrimmage, and they also put their hands on Brian Thomas Jr. The one player that we talk about from a talent standpoint that could have a significant advantage over those tactics would be Brian Thomas Jr. So even though he didn't put up the crazy numbers that he did his rookie season, he still has a big impact on this offense because of the threat of what he can do when he gets one-on-one coverage on the outside. Now, he has to punish people for playing one-on-one coverage, for leaving them isolated on the island. But we have seen when given those opportunities as a rookie and even down the stretch as a second-year player, he can put up big numbers. He can make it happen. He is still a guy that you have to game plan and account for his whereabouts. And because of that, I still kind of think he's the number 1 receiver when the Jaguars head into training camp. Last thing that I am interested in, and this is coming on the heels of rookie minicamp, which is why it's so interesting. Why are the Jaguars investing heavily in the tight end position? The Jaguars have 5 tight ends, 5 on their training camp roster right now, and they drafted 2 guys, Nate Boerkircher and then Tanner Koziel in the draft. Now, Boerkircher was a bit of a controversial pick because they took him 56. People said that he wasn't worthy of going in the second round. Consensus board had him somewhere maybe 4th or so round. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, what were the Jags thinking when they made the pick in the second round? And really, what were they thinking when they came back in the fourth and made Tanner Kozil a Jaguar? Here's what they're thinking. The Jaguars and Liam Cohen last year watched the NFL kind of expand their utilization of multiple tight end sets, particularly 3 tight ends. Last year, NFL accounted for like 1,800 plays with 3 tight ends on the field at the same time. The leader in the clubhouse, the LA Rams, had 131 of those plays with 13 personnel. And if you don't know what the numbers mean, 13 personnel means 1 back, 3 tight ends, 1 wide receiver. You put the running back first, the number tight end second. That's how you get the number. So 13 personnel, 1 back, 3 tight ends. Rams were first in that. Matthew Stafford had a lot of success. Last year, when you look at the Jaguars had 202 snaps with 2 tight ends on the field. That's 12 personnel. And 31 snaps with 3 tight ends on the field. The reason why this is relevant is because last year, the Jaguars had over 100 catches by their tight end. It was 10th most in the National Football League. And I would say they did it with one guy that you really worry about, and that's Bretton Strange. The other guys were more throw-ins. They're guys that are more check-down options, not real playmakers. This year, coming on the heels of watching NFL tight ends have 2,870 combined catches, the Jaguars want to make sure they make the tight ends an integral part of the passing game. Part of that is because they want to play big in the run game, but also a big part of it is when you get more big bodies on the field, you can create mismatches on the perimeter. You give Trevor Lawrence maybe a bigger strike zone to target because you have a bigger body over the middle of the field. And throwing over the middle is the easiest throw for the quarterback. So if you populate the lineup with big bodies, more than likely his efficiency and effectiveness is going to go up. The other part of that is now you can begin to play the physical style and the physical brand of ball that Liam Cohen wants. Remember, he talked about finding an edge, and that edge has always been for the Jaguars their physicality. They want to beat people up in the trenches. They want to run the football with force. They want to use the force in the running game to set up play action and big plays. And the way that you can do that is showing the illusion of a power running team by putting 13 personnel on the field to set up these big plays, these chunky plays to a wide receiver that is on the perimeter. But you also can do it with the tight ends that you have in the game. Bretton Strange is one of the best move tight ends in the game. We'll say that his emergence last year was critical to the development of Trevor Lawrence's game, to the way that this offense fully, I would say, blossomed in Liam Cohen's first year. And it's because Bretton Strange, when healthy, he was dominating over the middle field to the point where you had to kind of pay close attention to him. Now, he didn't command a consistent double team, but on certain downs when he had it cooking, you had to put 2 guys in his direction. That now leaves one-on-one for Brian Thomas, Jacoby Myers, or Parker Washington. So whether it's Brian Thomas Jr. commanding a double team or whether it's the tight end commanding the double team, those 2 guys set the table for the offense. What the Jaguars are doing is, hey, let's use him, Bretton Strange, to set the table, but let's make sure we balance out his responsibility so he's always doing what is a strength of his, not a weakness. Now, he's certainly a credible blocker. He can block on the perimeter. We saw that last year when he was the main tight end in their 11 personnel package. But if you have an opportunity to add another guy like Borkercher, what it does is it allows you to have the wide tight end, Borkercher, the second-round pick. He can be the guy that's on the line. And then your move guy is Strange. Your guy that lines up outside of the Z receiver sometimes. That's Strange. The guy that motions in and out and is the yo-yo that creates and exploits mismatches. That becomes the role that Bretton Strange can play. By now doubling down, with Tanner Kozil coming on board, now you have multiple flex tight ends that can take advantage of these matchups against safeties and linebackers in space. Let's talk about the picks because so much conversation about Borkercher and what he couldn't do. And the fact he only had 38 or 39 receptions over his career at Nebraska, first as a walk-on that made it on the 2 deep, that climbed his way to being a very key contributor for the Cornhuskers, who then transferred to Texas A&M and played with a loaded offense where he wasn't the feature guy. That's fine. But when you watch his game, he is at his best when he's moving bodies at the line of scrimmage. He's a physical blocker. He plays into, I would say, the type of team that the Jaguars want to be, and that's a knock him around at the line of scrimmage team, where you put another big body, 6'4", 245 pounds, Beside that beefy offensive line, now the Jaguars might be able to run the football consistently versus any front. And Cozil, we are talking about someone who, I mean, these numbers are ridiculous. During his career, 237 receptions, 2234 receiving yards, 24 touchdowns. But that's not the numbers that you really need to pay attention to. Last year, he led FBS tight ends with 74 catches. Over the last 2 years, he's led all players with 168 catches. All players, most catches, Tanner Cozil. So now what the Jaguars are doing is they are creating a dynamic tight end core that can not only create mismatches, they can exploit mismatches, and they can do it from a variety of different formations. And when you add layers to the cake, where we talk about Brian Thomas Jr. potentially being on the field with that 13 personnel, or two tight ends and Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas Jr., or Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers, or Parker Washington and Brian Thomas. There are a bunch of different things that Liam can get into. But by having all of these big-bodied athletes, these tight ends that can do a bunch of different things and have complementary skill sets, you have now given Liam a blank canvas to paint masterpieces each and every week, utilizing similar play concepts out of different personnel groupings to really put defensive coordinators in a bind. And when we talk about the tight end position and how easy it is to dictate the matchups in this personnel grouping, the Jaguars' decision to invest in the tight ends could pay off huge, could pay significant dividends when we get to the end of the regular season. So that's what I have for you. Those are three things to watch. Is the Travis Hunter experiment over? No. Will Brian Thomas Jr. remain the number one receiver? I have a sneaking suspicion that he finds a way to be the lead receiver in this offense. And why are the Jaguars investing so heavily in tight ends? We wrap that up. We're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to make sure we continue to watch all those things over the course of the summer. And we are always going to pay close attention to the Jaguars on the Bucky Brooks Show. I am Bucky Brooks, and I am